All right. So today I'm going to start something that I actually made the YouTube channel for it. Now, despite what it shows right now, um, my main topic is not actually antinatalism. It's philosophy in general. That's where the name is coming from, sophophilia, which some guy on the internet thinks is perverted, because of the philia part of it. But I mean, I was trying to get a name for philosophy, and philosophy was taken, obviously. So I went for sophophilia. It's just philia is the love for Sophie, the wisdom. Anyway, so when I started the channel, my idea was talking about philosophy, and it's just I'm very interested in philosophy, in logic, and in science in general, math, physics, and all the philosophical discussions that comes with it. Um, so that's why I made the channel to be able to talk about these different things. And I guess after I don't know how many years, I finally got to that point that I can actually talk about them. So, I talked too much actually. So this video, before you start unsubscribing, because I know the title is a little bit scary, that I'm going to talk about an argument for the existence of God. I have to give a couple of points. First, I'm just going to talk about God in a kind of philosophical sense. It's not about religion. It's not about miracles, revelation, or anything like that, any fancy stuff. It's just a philosophical discussion into this topic, purely based on reason, something very close to deism. So that's one. So don't unsubscribe. Two. What was two? You see, I'm talking ahead of myself. Okay, so one is just I'm going to talk about God. Two is I'm not planning to convince you that there's a God. This is more like a story of how an argument convinced me that there's a God. That's a completely different thing, okay? Because the arguments have different powers for different people. Some arguments work for some doesn't. But three, I'm not really convinced that the existence of God is an important thing. Like, as I said, it's not about revelation, it's not about religion, it's just about philosophical discussion. So I'm not still yet convinced that the question of God is important. So I'm only investigating it as some interesting philosophy. Theology is an interesting branch of philosophy, I would say. And the last point is that I'm not against science or anything like that. As I told you before, I'm very into math, physics. I'm doing my PhD in engineering sciences. In parallel, I love physics so much that even though I was studying engineering, at the same time I was also studying physics. I was very in love with physics and modern physics specifically, and the the philosophy of science and everything that went with it. I had a couple of roommates who were physicists, and we were really into having discussions. Anyhow, so let's go back to the question of God. Okay, it's going to be, of course, I won't be able to finish it in one video. The goal is that I'm going to have a series of different videos just talking about this concept. Now, the first video, I'm just going to set up the story, the background, so you would know where I'm coming from and why I love this sort of argument to the concept of God. I will explain exactly what I mean by God. I hope you realize that I have OCD, so I'm very sensitive toward these things. Everything has to be crystal clear for me, otherwise it doesn't work. And that's why I might get into very small details. It might become boring for you, I don't know. But if you're into details like me, if you're like a nerd, then you might enjoy it. So sorry for that, but that's just how I do, how I think. you get to see what's happening inside my mind. All right, so I will try to use this video as just a general background of this story, and then in next videos I will get into more details about the arguments. We will lay it out. We can talk about it. You can ask questions in the comments. We can have a discussion. I mean, I'm feeling pretty comfortable with this new format, so I guess I can have videos frequently. So we're good. All right. So an argument for the existence of God. Now that's a good question. All right. So so as I said, so different arguments have different forces for people. And for me is a form of a cosmological argument that convinced me that at least the question of God needs to be taken seriously, not in a sense that the existence of it is going to have a great impact on our lives. That's still not clear for me, but only in a sense that this question is having a valid how to say it's meaningful to ask this kind of question. The question of God is meaningful, and the answer can actually provide some insight into the nature and how it works, and it might be able to help you, or at least it's helping me with my philosophical discussions. Anyway, I'm thinking too much. Okay. All right. So it's a cosmological argument, and basically works based on the principle of sufficient reason. And I will go into more details, explain exactly what I mean by that. Now, some people might call that principle the principle of causality, also it's been named. But again, because everything has to be clear for me, I will bring up my own definition of what I mean by this principle. But before even I get to that definition, I have to first give you a sense of what I mean and where does that come from. All right, so let's go back to my childhood. I would say I was interested in science always, and I still am. Yeah, that's what happens when you're not a native English speaker. And sometimes I ask, like, what is the interesting aspect of science? What is it about science that attracts me? Now, you can have your own answer, but for me, it's a comfort that I get from science, a comfort in knowing that you can understand the world around you. Like when I was a kid, I remember when I was seeing something happening, like you see something, anything, you see fire, or you see the water on the ground has turned into a specific color. And I have that example because it's very clear in my mind. It was when I was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, that I saw that, and I was like, okay, like it's just rained, so the water should be clear on the ground, but why is it in this kind of weird yellow color? And I was like, okay, something must have happened to make that water yellow. Like there is a mechanism, something has happened here. So I was trying to understand like what it is that happened. I remember even at that time I started making experiments, what is it about this thing? Why the water has changed color? And so to me, that's the comfort. That's the comforting part of science. That when I look outside and see something happen, if I think that there is absolutely no reason for it happening, like there is no mechanism, there's no cause, something that there's nothing that led to that event, I get into this kind of weird feeling that I don't know. I get agitated. Can Can you imagine, like, imagine that you're walking and then you see something, or you come home and you see a dog in your house. And imagine that we're living in a world where there is no explanation, nothing to explain why there is a dog in your house. Like, where did it come from? And that's scary for me. That's kind of very confusing. Like, so I'm not really into making just to argument for a specific proposition. I'm more into these kind of consistencies, as I explained in previous videos. So when I say, okay, when I see something, there is a cause for it, as I will later formulate it more accurately. I'm not saying that has to be true, or that's actually the case in our world. What I'm saying is that if I don't accept that, and I'm completely fine with it, I'm completely fine with all these propositions not being true. But if I say, okay, yeah, let's say, okay, it's not true. Like, the dog is in my house, but there is absolutely no reason why the dog is there. Not that there is a reason and I can't find it. There's just no reason. We're living in such a world that that's an actual possibility. Then I can't really live consistently. Like, I can't live comfortably in that world, But that would be very weird. Like, imagine that. So for me, there is this comfort in knowing that anything that happens, there is a reason, there is an explanation for it. There's a mechanism, You see a rainbow in the sky. There are things, there's a process. In other words, there's something to understand. And science is our way to get to that answer, most of the time. Sometimes we don't get it, but the comfort is that there is an answer, that there is something to be understood. Now, sometimes we can get to it, sometimes we can't, but the fact that there is, for me, it's a very, sensible, comforting sense of being real. I don't know how to explain it, but you know what I mean. You see something, even though you're not completely sure why, but you're just comforted by the sense that there is an answer to that question. Why? Now, again, so people usually call this the principle of sufficient reason. But the way that they are usually formulated is not really interesting for me. It really doesn't hit the nail. It doesn't explain exactly what I feel about this sense. So, for example, sometimes they say the principle of sufficient reason means that everything has an explanation for its existence. Now, these different interpretations, they can be related to each other, these different sayings of the same principle. You can convert them, more or less. But again, I feel like some forms I really can't connect to it. So, for example, this form, that everything has an explanation for its existence. I'm like, why? It's not that. At least I can say that. It's not that. Like, when I see a dog in my house, the reason that I'm freaked out and I'm like, why? Like, my mind wants an explanation. It's not because there exists a dog in my house and I want to have an explanation for that existence per se. It's not just that. It's something more to it. I feel like that there's a piece missing in that thing, in that form of saying it. Again, it's very similar to what I will be define later on, but still I feel like something's missing. So when someone tells me, hey, like sometimes you see Christian philosophers like William Lane Craig says everything has an explanation for its existence, and my brain says, why? Who says that? Like, why? At least that's not what I feel, that everything has an explanation for its existence. I don't feel like. So the other ways that people usually put it, I guess Alexander Proust in his book says that every contingent fact has an explanation, which might be accurate philosophically, but is too detached from our common sense, contingent fact or contingent proposition. What does that mean? I mean, I know it means something, but again, it even though you can again convert them into each other, but you don't. I don't feel it, And as I said, I'm very sensitive to everything. For me, it has to be crystal clear. And if I want to, even though they might be equivalent in terms of in theory, you might be able to prove that, hey, like these are actually equivalent spaces. There is a bijection between this space and this space, but still, I want to start from where I am exactly, not from all the equivalent theoretical positions, because then I would feel like there is a gap somewhere in my thinking. So, I start from this sense again. So again, everything has an explanation for its existence. Doesn't really hit it. Every contingent fact. So what is it exactly? So again, going back to that dog or some other example, for example, let's say that, okay, I have this hair color, black. Why isn't it brown? Like why isn't my hair brown? Why is it black? I guess the reason that this question comes up, why, is because for me as a human being with black hair, it is possible as a human being to have hair with a different color, to have brown hair or blonde. It's possible. So because it's possible, my mind requires an explanation for why is it that within this world of possibilities, this specific hair color is actualized. That's why I said that some people call it the principle of causality, because this kind of, if you talk about it in this sense, it gets really close to potentiality and actuality in kind of Aristotelian metaphysics. And the way that people like Edward Fazer define causality. I'm not Edward Fazer, but I mean, you know what I mean. Scholastic philosophers. But I guess that is exactly where my mind starts asking for an explanation. When something can be different, when it is possible for my hair to be of a different color, there is this kind of natural tendency to ask for an explanation. Why is it that this possibility is actualized rather than the other one? And I guess that's the reason. So when I see the dog, it's not just because the dog exists that I'm asking for an explanation for the existence of dog in my room. The explanation is because I know that my house, as my house, it is possible for it not to have a dog in it. How do I know that? Because, well, yesterday there was no dog, an hour ago there was no dog. I know my house. I don't have any dog. So because there is this possibility for my house to not have a dog in it, and now there is a dog, when this bifurcation happened, you need to know, like, why is it that this possibility is actualized right now rather than the other one? What activates this scenario over this scenario? And I guess that's exactly what I feel about that requirement for an explanation, the principle of sufficient reason. That's how I define it. If something can be different from what it is right now, it requires an explanation. That also gets very close to that principle of causality, because it seems that something has to activate that specific thing instead of the other one. So we ask, okay, for me as a human being, it is possible to have a different hair color. Why is it? What is the mechanism behind my having black hair? What activated that possibility? Well, of course, genes would be one of my, so the genetic protocols and genetic mechanisms in place, that's one of the explanations. But any situation that we can have something to be different, again, for me as a human being, can have a different color, now it's black, why? Then it comes the explanation. And as you can see, you can actually turn these things into the other definitions. So for example, when someone says, yeah, everything has to have an explanation for its existence, now I can see why this definition does not exactly match it, because if you tell me that something exists, but it is possible for it to not exist, then my mind starts to ask a question, why? But if you just tell me, hey, something exists, my brain's still waiting. It doesn't immediately jump to the conclusion, oh, there must be an explanation for it. No. At least for me, it doesn't work like that. For me, it's someone says, okay, something exists. I'm saying, okay. But it is possible for it to not exist. I'm like, oh, okay. But why then? If it's possible for it to not exist, then why does it exist right now? So you can see how this can turn into that other definition of principle of sufficient reason. I just realized that I've been looking at my wallpaper for a very long time, and I forgot to look at the camera. It's a very interesting scene. Sorry if I lost contact with you. But I get lost in thought. I usually focus on one point, and there is a very beautiful scene in front of me, and I got lost in the mountains. Anyway. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. And as a cosmological argument, you can already see, if you're into it, where this is going. But this is the foundation. This would be the main principle that I will use to investigate the concept, the existence of God. The principle of sufficient reason, I would call it. To again summarize, so I would call it, if there is something, if it is possible for something to be different from what it is right now, then I need an explanation why it is at that configuration other than the other possible ones. If I have a glass of water on this position, I know that it is possible for it to be in different positions. So that requires an explanation from me. Like, why is it that this specific position is activated rather than other positions? So yeah, I guess that's how I want to finish this video. In later videos, I will try to see if I can extend on it. I mean, not if I can, I will. I'm pretty sure I will. But yeah, I guess if you have any question, just ask me and then we can discuss it further. But then in the next video, I will try to build up on this principle and go into details. It's not going to be just discussion. It will be, it will have like a rigid, nice structure, the argument. But this first video, it was an introduction. I just wanted to give you a sense of where this argument is coming from. Because again, as I say, it's a kind of personal thing. It might not work as well for you, but I'm just going to tell a story. So I hope you can relate to it, and I hope you can come along so we can have discussions regarding this topic. And I mean, I'm pretty sure when it's over, when we get to more complicated, more advanced stuff, there will be much more controversy, and there will be very interesting discussions that we can have later on. So yeah, see you.